to just sort of throw this line in here whilst we're doing this podcast, which came from Amy Lawrence, which is you can't have a post-mortem when the person isn't actually dead yet. And that kind of feels like we are doing a little bit, David. But Adrian's point there, squad of 18, 19 that Mikel Arteta trusts all of them. And Arsenal fans probably hate this, but this goes back to Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, who do operate really with a squad of 18, 19, who Pep Guardiola has the complete trust in. It's a smaller squad than a lot of Premier League rivals work with.
Yeah, it's certainly not a squad of 32, Mark. And there's trust, which is the key word in all or most of those players. And you've heard numerous managers speak over the years. I think I remember Maurizio Pochettino at Tottenham when he led them to the Champions League final, talking about how he liked working with a small squad where everybody was really closely knit. And clearly Arteta's trying to build that. We remember vividly how he and Edu as technical director, sort of now sporting director, oversaw a cull really of players on the periphery, the likes of Mesut Ozil, Shkodran Mustafi, Socrates, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and others. And now he's got a nucleus of what he wants, but I think they're going to have to upgrade in certain areas and build depth in others. And that's why it makes this a particularly busy summer. I think Arsenal are now moving to a more mature stage of their development where they're going to try and bring in some really high-level players and with experience as well as they move into the Champions League. And, that's why it's going to be even tougher for younger players to break through as well. You need to be at the level maybe of a Bukayo Saka if you're going to get there. You're not even seeing somebody like Emile Smith-Rowe getting opportunities at the minute, let alone players lower down the ladder. And that's testament to the progress Arsenal are making under Arteta. Expectations have changed. Standards have been raised. The bar is now being set far higher than it was before. And it's going to create dilemmas. It's going to create headaches, mostly healthy, but big questions of budgets and quality of recruitment.
Okay, so when we look to the summer, what kind of budget do they have? I mean, you might not be probably unlikely to give an actual figure, but are they in the market for one £80 million player? Could they have two £80 million players? What's their level?
Well, I'm not aware of there being a defined budget. Perhaps there is. And if there is, I don't know the exact number. The evidence of recent times would suggest that the Cronkies are prepared to back Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, Edu heavily within the transfer market. They've put their money where their mouth is, which was something that a lot of people, fans of Arsenal, wanted to see for a long time, and they've delivered in recent transfer windows. I don't see why that wouldn't have continued in any circumstances, let alone now that they're going to have the revenue uplift of being in Europe's top-tier competition. And for that reason, you imagine they'll crack on with targets, central midfield being a priority. They've been heavily linked. In January, of course, we saw with Declan Rice, they looked at that one and then ended up cracking on with a deal for Moises Caicedo. It didn't come to fruition. So, of course, you imagine if they felt the need to strengthen in that area in the middle of the season, then they definitely will want to in the summer. And perhaps a slight weakness has been shown around there. Thomas Partey hasn't maybe been on top of his game. They ended up going with Jorginho as a relatively short-term solution, but now's the opportunity to address it for the long term. And so we see every day links with Declan Rice, and we know how strong their admiration is for him. So it's whether they do indeed pick up that one and try and get it done. I suspect they'll face competition for him as well. And his stock appears to be rising with West Ham, although it's at that 2 years to go contract stage where you would imagine West Ham, now having resisted his sale previously, would sanction it for the right price. I don't know what will happen with Caicedo, whether they go back in for him, whether the price would be too high after signing his new contract at Brighton. I think there's a good chance he may leave, but again, the competition will be fierce. And then in front of that sort of more holding position, the six, so to speak, there is the need or the feeling around the club that maybe a bit more creativity is needed in front to supplement the likes of Martin Odegaard. And that's why there is admiration for Mason Mount, for example. They'll have others on their list as well, no doubt, and other clubs will be interested in him too. So it's whether they manage to get a couple in midfield. Would they do one now or one in the next transfer window? And then, of course, there are other positions. And, central defence is one that I definitely think they'll be looking to bring in reinforcements in, whether it's a starter or a backup player. I think Rob Holding will have a year to go. And despite his clear quality, we've seen in the absence of William Saliba that it's a bit of a markdown when he's absent. Kivior, interestingly, started last night and played pretty well. And then you even look at the fullback positions. What's going to happen with Kieran Tierney? And if he was to leave, would they need to reinforce at left back? At right back, Ben White's been playing there. Tomiyasu's got a checkered injury record. If he can't be depended on fitness-wise, is Ben White the only option? I don't know who would fill in. Is there a young player coming through who they can really trust? It doesn't appear so yet. And then there's an ongoing question about the striker department. Can you go with just Jesus and Nketiah in the Champions League and fighting on all fronts? Or do you need to bring in somebody to bolster in that area, with the unlikely scenario of it being following Balogun, because his progress has led him to the point where he wants to play permanently in he wants a regular starting slot somewhere. That's unlikely to be at Arsenal for now. And as we've reported on The Athletic, there's a very good chance that he could leave permanently this summer.
So I've just tallied that up. They're going to sign 15 players in the summer. Bloody hell.
Well, it's a Chelsea level spend, the way I've described it. And I definitely do not mean to say there'll be.
But there'll be some sales, won't they? There'll be some sales.
And there we
go. Adrian, there's the balancing act.
And that, Adrian, was what I was going to come on to with you. How they sell this summer could be really important for them. If you're looking at, they're going to the next level, they'll probably have to spend more money on the kind of players they want. They're moving from maybe £30 million market to £60 million market. So how they sell is going to be vital, because that in previous, one of Liverpool's successes was built around how they sold some of their young players, but also players that they felt they could move on, like Coutinho, for a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I mean, there are a lot of players out on loan this season, and I would imagine that the vast majority of those are out on loan because Mikel Arteta doesn't have a place for them. So they would be top of the list. Nicola Pepe is a clear example. I think following Balogun, a lot of Arsenal fans would love to see him get a chance, and he might do in pre-season on the Tour of America. Will he hit the ground running? Does he fit in with the style of play, etc.? How does he look next to Eddie Nketiah? That, I think, is a big question mark. And if he looks sharper than Eddie, then what happens there? Maybe it's Eddie that they cash in on. We'll have to wait and see. But it wouldn't surprise me if Balogun went in the way that Willock went. Obviously, Joe Willock, when he was hot on that loan spell, they cashed in, didn't they, when his stock was high? And they might do that with Balogun. Pepe, I think, has to go. And there'll be others too. So yeah, that's one way of balancing the books. But I would echo what Orny said there in terms of the areas of the pitch. I think centre midfield for sure. Definitely a striker. I've been banging this drum. I bore myself talking about it. Me and Amy Lawrence on Handbrake Off. We've been saying since last summer, let's go for a different profile of striker, someone a bit bigger, someone that gives a different option. I hope that happens. I really do. I mean, the one that I always come to is Ivan Toney. And now I don't know whether Arsenal have any interest in Ivan Toney, but he would be the ideal type of player, I think, that can do a job for you in the Premier League on a Saturday and Sunday, and that frees up Gabriel Jesus to hit it against Real Madrid or whoever on a Tuesday.
And actually, Adrian, that's exactly the kind of signing that would have been made, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, by sides. By successful big Premier League teams. They would go to that next tier down, the sort of players who'd proved themselves and were ready for the next step up. Now, we all know that doesn't feel like it happens as much anymore.
Well, it did happen, didn't it, with White? It happened with Trossard.
Yes, I suppose it did happen with White.
It's sort of begun to happen at Arsenal. they've gone to the smaller clubs in the Premier League and sort of not bullied them, but thrown their weight around a little bit. They tried to do it with Caicedo in January. We're talking about Declan Rice. I love this shift, and I think it's a really welcome one because Premier League proven does matter. And I know that you pay a little bit extra, but look what's happened with Fabio Vieira, someone that was really, really talented, scouted, no doubt, for a long time. But you don't know. You don't know how he's going to handle the Premier League. And he's done all right. But I think that there's probably a feeling of slight underwhelmment at what he's produced so far. With Trossard, the comparison is obvious. So, look, at centre-half, I'm just going to chuck names out here. They're the first ones that come to my head. But at centre-half, what about a Lewis Dunk? Somebody like that can pass out from the back brilliantly, and then you got Ivan Toney, and then obviously we know about the central midfield interest in Rice and Caicedo. So yeah, they're the type of players I'd go for if it were me.
On behalf of all non-Arsenal fans, particularly Brighton fans, apologies for this being yet another podcast where someone comes on and tries to nick all your best players and, although not on this one, your manager as well. David.
Adrian, what do you think of reports linking Arsenal to Mark Gehi of Crystal Palace? He's clearly a player who is rising in stock for club and country. There have been suggestions that Tottenham and others are keen too, but Arsenal has been cropping up a little bit recently. And would that sort of fit your criteria for quality, depth, even homegrown? Age profile in
almost
defense?
I think he's there or thereabouts. I actually think he's taken a slight backward step this season, Mark Guehi. I don't think he's been as good this season as he was the previous year. You asked me a year ago, I would have said yeah, for sure. But I don't know if he's kicked on. And there were one or two little question marks there. Is he too laid back, for example? I think that would be a question mark that I'd put over him. But yeah, I think he's the profile. He'd be happy, I would imagine, to be the third choice. But Kivior, I think, will be the cover for Gabriel. It is finding someone right-footed that's pretty much as good as Saliba, or almost as good as Saliba, that will be happy getting 20 games in all competitions over the course of a season. And yeah, somebody like that would be fine.
Then Arsenal are going to have to make some tough decisions because they have a financial fair play situation to consider, like every other club. You mentioned Chelsea before. Does sentiment start to go out the window a little bit there? That all clubs will want some, a British core, some homegrown players, but equally they will think that any players they bring in will immerse themselves in club culture and Arsenal identity, which many of the current Arsenal players have. And then you look at the balance sheet as well, selling somebody like Balogun or Patino or Smith Rowe, there's zero on the books. It's pure profit, which is a conversation, Mark, that we've been having a lot on Chelsea. So the situation with Patino now is actually not too dissimilar to Balogun. Their preference is not to go on another loan away from Arsenal. Patino has a year longer than Balogun. But, that was an option that was activated by Arsenal not with Balogun, but with Patino. So he would have remained, I think, on his previous salary, which should have been very low. Really, if he's part of your plans, you need to put him on a new contract and reward him accordingly. If that's not happening, which it doesn't seem to be right now, then a decision needs to be made. And it sounds like the boy is driving that decision, that he wants to go and play regular football somewhere. And I think we can all see he's probably not going to be part of Arsenal's Champions League plans next season. They're going to upgrade in that midfield department. And so tough decisions need to be taken. And I think the idea of Arsenal getting to a stage now where they have assets to trade is one that's going to appeal to them. It's a sign of their sort of advancement that they're taking in terms of their recruitment structure, their status as a club. And I think people like Edu will not shy away from the idea of trading.